everyone, welcome back to Onyx Pages. I'm Jerry, and I'm here to tell you that I have finally revamped the 7 cowrie shell rating system. When I started this channel, I decided that I would start off right away by creating my own rating system. And the reason that I did that was because I wanted to make sure that I gave you quality reviews. As you know, I don't only read for entertainment, although that is part of why I read. But I also read because I am somebody who is very socially justice oriented. I take an anti-oppression approach to the way that I live my life and to the things that I do. And I also take that approach to what I read, how I purchase books, and how I talk about those books. And if you've been subscribed to this channel for more than a month, then you'll see that when I do produce book reviews, I do talk about social justice issues as they relate to the books that I read, and also as they relate to the ways that I've grown because of the books that I read. So in the past year and a bit since I've been on booktube, I've realized that the originally drafted 7 cowrie shell system wasn't quite meeting my needs. I had a number of questions that were great conversation starters for me, but they didn't really get to the core of what I wanted to talk about. So for example, I asked the question, is this book Afrofuturist? Well, that would be a really good question, except this entire channel is dedicated to Afrofuturism, science fiction, fantasy, magical realism, and now horror. So that closed-ended question really only garnered a yes or a no answer and didn't really get into more detail. So I've actually eliminated that question now. Similarly, I asked the question, is there LGBT content in this novel? Which is a very critical question for me as a Black queer woman. However, I tended to only talk about whether or not there were LGBT characters, which is an issue that can be covered in the other question about characters. So over the past couple of months, I've been thinking about what I really want to talk to you about when I review books. I've also revisited the work of Walida Imarisha and Morgan Phillips, who created the principles that are now collected into this concept called visionary fiction. And if you want to learn more about visionary fiction, you should check out the video that should be uploading around the same time as this video, where I interview Walida Imarisha, who is amazing. She is an educator, she is an artist, she is an activist, she is a writer, and most importantly, she's lovely. And she talks about how social justice activism and science fiction writing are really different sides of the same coin, and she talks about the creation of visionary fiction and her work in Octavia's Brood, and also Angels with Dirty Faces, which is a work that comes out of her prison justice work. In any event, all of this has been mashed up together into a new 7 cowrie shell reading system. We'll call it the 7 cowrie shell 2.0 reading system that I'm going to tell you about today. So I got my Jimi Hendrix notebook, and let's get started, as they say on the booktubes. Cowrie shell number 1, I am still going to be asking questions about world building. So I'll first describe the world that's built in this SFF novel or short work or graphic work or whatnot, and I will ask 3 questions. Does the world engage power inequities? How does the world advance the conditions of Black peoples, and which ones? And is this a world that I need? So what I'm trying to get at in the new revamped world building question is more of a purposeful approach to world building. Authors spend a lot of time thinking about the world that they want to create, designing it for the reader or themselves, and really wrapping it around an important question. So the elements of the world, the dimensions of the world, the timing and pacing of the world, I'm assuming are all deliberate acts. And so in this question, when I'm assessing based on world building, I want to be able to talk about that purpose, in addition to talking about how well and consistently this world was built. I'm still going to be talking about characters, which is going to be the second cowrie shell. So after describing the main and secondary characters, I will ask another 3 questions. Are the characters well developed? Are they intersectional in identity? And is at least one of the characters LGBTQ? If there are no LGBTQ characters, then the book will not be able to earn a full cowrie shell for characters. So here, just like in the past, I will be looking at the people, the humans, and the non-human entities who are also characters in the stories. And I'll be talking about their relationships with each other, what these characters represented, the diversity and representation in these characters, and how their stories spoke to me. The cowrie number 3 is going to be focused on point of view. And this is one of the new sections that are very closely related to visionary fiction. So after describing the point of view or the points of view from which the novel or the short work or graphic work is written, I'll be asking 2 questions. Is the story told from the point of view of the most marginalized community or the most marginalized person? And is this a point of view that I need to hear more from, and why? So the reason that I'm asking about marginalization comes out of this anti-oppression approach to reading, the visionary fiction approach to reading and writing, which is that we could write stories in order to rebalance power, right? And to dismantle oppression. So I'm going to be looking at the books that I read from that perspective. Do they tell the same old story of, white male or female heterosexual Christian communities running things? A lot of science fiction stories, if you look back in time, are written from the perspective of the colonizer coming into a less powerful community or planet and taking over. Well, if that's the case in the story that I'm reading, I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to challenge that, because that is not what we need to be doing as a global community. So if that's what's happening in the book, it's not going to earn a cowrie shell. It's kind of just that simple. The 4th cowrie shell is going to be focused on relevance. So here I'm looking at the conflict, the theme, or the problem that the story is meant to solve. And the questions that I'm going to ask are, is the conflict, theme, or problem thoroughly examined? So are we looking at all the different dimensions that come into conflict with each other in this story? Or is the conflict only viewed from one perspective over the other? So for example, if we use the space colonizing trope, right, where you've got one community that goes to another community in order to colonize and dominate it, well, is the story told from the perspective of those who need more resources, or their world is dying so they need to colonize another world? Or is the world told by those who are experiencing and perhaps resisting that colonization? The other question in the relevance cowrie shell section is the conflict, theme, or problem relevant to me as a Black queer woman? And does it invite an important change? So this is where I start to look at whether the author has chosen a conflict or problem or a theme that I think is important to talk about. Number 5 is options. So for this cowrie shell, I'm going to describe the different strategies that the author presents to us through the characters and through the plot. So for example, if we look at Octavia Butler's Dawn, we have a main character who's a Black woman who wakes up after being, I think she's forced into like a coma-like state. And she wakes up and she realizes that the world that she knew no longer exists, and that aliens have taken over the Earth because humans screwed up, and these aliens are now attempting to effectively colonize the Earth. And what they want to do is they want to coerce human beings into mating with them and creating new subspecies that can now inhabit this Earth. Now, of course, the main character is not free, But she has options. She has options. She has choices to make about how she's going to deal with the situation. She's been identified as a leader for a number of different reasons. She's been given superhuman strength so that she can subdue the other human beings if they don't go along with this big master plan. And so she has to figure out how she's going to manage all of this. And Butler gives us a number of different pathways that this woman can take. And those pathways can help the reader think about how the reader themselves has to deal with questions of oppression and marginalization and coercion and autonomy and agency and resistance. And so for this question, I'm going to be asking, are the options that are presented to us through the story meaningful and relevant? Number 6 is Otherworldly Elements. So as you know, I'm an SFF. Number 6 is Otherworldly Elements. So as you know, I read within the Afrofuturism genre, also outside of it, science fiction, fantasy, magical realism, horror, and so on. And so for this cowrie shell, what I'm going to be looking at is, does this new magical system or supernatural power or superpower or scientific speculation, does it challenge power inequities? And does it cause me to reflect on myself, on the world, on others? And is it awesome? So for this, what I'm really looking at is, what is the nature of the power that is created? And to give you an example of why this is important, when I was at WizCon, I attended a panel on Black lightning. And there were a number of amazing, very thoughtful, very well-read panelists who were talking about comics and superpowers. One of the things that they said that I'd never heard of before was that Black superheroes tend to have elemental powers. So powers coming from the earth, for example. And that's been a trope for a really long time. And it's somewhat controversial. I'd never thought of that. And honestly, I'm not sure I fully understand what that means because I don't read a lot of comics. But after hearing that, I started to think about superhuman beings, superheroes who are Black. And I started to look at their superpowers and then compare those superpowers to the superpowers of other heroes. And I noticed some patterns. I also noticed patterns between the superpowers that are bestowed upon female or cis female superheroes versus those bestowed upon men. And I've also noted different patterns. So I'm not going to really get into that discussion, but that's what this question is meant to ask. The 6th cowrie shell is going to be about otherworldly elements. So here what I'm looking at are the magical systems, the superpowers, the supernatural or paranormal elements in the story. Are they innovative? Are they interesting? Are they different? Do they challenge power structures? Are they awesome? Those are the questions I'm going to ask. So for example, for those of you who have read the Binti trilogy, you'll know that there is a specific magical / spiritual skill that Binti has that we've never seen before in science fiction and fantasy writing. It's completely new, 100% innovative, and many people have talked about how that has blown their mind. Similarly, when we look at superheroes, we're always thinking about what kind of superpowers they have, what their weaknesses are, and what that says about those individuals. I remember going to a panel at WizCon where we were talking about the Black Lightning series on Netflix. One of the panelists said that Black superheroes tend to have elemental powers that are tied to the earth or tied to the land in some way. I'd never heard that before, and it certainly got me thinking about patterns and how superpowers are distributed. And then it got me thinking about whether those powers and the distribution of those powers based on race or gender or other social locations were metaphors for how we engage with each other in this waking life? So I'm going to be asking those questions when I read these stories, and I'll comment on those in my review. The final Cowrie is the reading experience. And I realized in the 7 Cowrie rating system 1.0 that I really didn't spend a lot of time talking about how enjoyable the reading experience was. Was it easy to read? Was it hard to read? Did I enjoy it? Was it edifying? Was it engaging? Was it entertaining? Was it educational? The 4 E's. So I've now dedicated a whole new Cowrie shell to the reading experience. And that's when I'm just going to tell you if I loved it and if I had fun and how fast I was able to read it, and what I think you might experience if you decide to pick up the read. So those are the 7 Cowries that I will now be using to assess what I read. As a final thought, I love reading. I love it. I love what I read. And I think that right now in 2019, all of us, even whether you're politically minded or not, whether you read the news or you don't, there's a lot going on in this world, and the worlds within this world. There's a lot. There's a lot of joy. There's a lot of innovation and creativity. There's also a lot of inequity. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of coercion happening as well. And I think that science fiction and fantasy writers in particular want to write stories that can encourage us to think outside of the box. And if you choose to watch the video where I interview Walida Imarisha, she says something that still has me thinking, which is that sometimes when we take ourselves out of the world that we're in right now and go into the land of the green people, we are more expansive in our thinking. When we're talking about aliens on another planet, we can imagine things that are wider and have more latitude than what we're willing to imagine in our own circumstances. So I'm hoping that the revamped 7 Cowrie shell rating system will prompt me to speak more deeply about the books that I'm reading and to convey to you why I think those books make a contribution to the advancement of Black folks, marginalized individuals, and by extension, everyone else. So that is me. I hope that you like this video. If you like it, if you have something to say, please comment and I will do my best to respond. And if you haven't yet subscribed to Onyx Pages, I would really appreciate it if you did. Thanks for watching. Bye.